Daenerys.
If you ever mention the word Daenerys in any context, then you've probably experienced this exact scenario. Mad Queen, Mad Queen, Mad Queen, Mad Queen, Mad Queen ad nauseum from every corner of the fandom. The hatred for Daenerys is so visceral that it's virtually impossible to have any discussion about her character without someone barging through the windows of your house and yelling about Mad Queen, Mad Queen, Mad Queen, Mad Queen. This barking was loud ever since Daenerys first appeared in A Game of Thrones, but intensified tenfold when the show gave her something that will likely be Jon Connington's storyline of nuking King's Landing. And no matter how many times you point out that this plot point has never been explicitly confirmed as something that is going to happen in the books, contrary to some other plot points that have been confirmed, it is considered 100% sure that Dany will, at some point in the books, destroy King's Landing, either by accident or on purpose, and either will die here and there, killed by someone to save the world from her female hysteria, or will go to the north to redeem herself, usually by being killed to prevent her female hysteria, to save the world. I debated whether the title of this video is appropriate, but I think it 100% is, and not only for clickbait reasons. I believe that, from men at least, the obsession with a sex slave turned a queen in her own right, turning into a mentally ill tyrant, indeed has psychosexual undertones, and I will explain why, alongside other reasons why I believe people are so obsessed with this prediction, why they are wrong, and how Dany and Dany alone is considered mad for things other characters do with much more frequency and for much more morally dubious reasons. Mad Queen Dany has been a theory ever since Daenerys appeared in A Game of Thrones, before anything could reasonably point to her turning in that direction, and that alone says a lot. Main reason for that is that her father was crazy, so his crazy genes are dormant in Dany and ready to kick in the second it's convenient for the plot. After all, the theme of female madness has been pervasive in our culture since the dawn of time, at least since ancient Greece. Women always exist as less rational, disciplined, and thus are more prone to mood swings, irrational overreactions, and mental illness. So already we have a solid reason for a belief in Dany turning crazy. It is ingrained into our culture to believe that women are emotional, stupid, and irrational. Couple it with beliefs about female power. Remember all the bedtime stories your parents would tell you. In those stories, the queens are almost always evil, standing in the way of good virginal princesses, and the story ends with a princess being a consort to a handsome prince. It's almost as if being ruled by a woman is the worst thing in the world. Today we don't have as many queens as we used to, but worry not. They were replaced by a horde of girl bosses. According to intersectional scholars from Twitter, our world is dominated by Margaret Thatchers who gained their girl power through corporate feminism, and every woman in a position of power is doomed to back fascist coups in Chile and send the troops to striking miners, so I suppose it's better to be a barefoot and pregnant housewife bimbo, and that corporate feminism is the biggest problem women are currently facing, since having professional goals means you're a girl boss Margaret Thatcher. Male tyranny is of course 100% okay, and the horde of girl bosses is so big that there are more men named John than these women corporate girl bosses. And we could stop here because this is a good enough explanation that Dany of course will turn evil. Patterns. Female power bad, women ruling bad, women not being docile passive servants bad. But to me, that obsession goes even deeper. I consider this obsession to be psychosexual in nature, and what better way to explain that than to use psychoanalysis? You've probably heard the term male gaze being used on TikTok and a bogus inversion of the term female gaze, and essentially this was reduced to when men think woman sexy and when woman think man sexy. In reality, the term male gaze means something else entirely, and female gaze does not meaningfully exist. This term was coined by Laura Mulvey and is used to describe the way women were perceived culturally for centuries, through the objectifying eye of a man. This is a big oversimplification, and I highly recommend reading the entire essay for yourself, which I will link in the description, but for the purposes of this video, we will use this simplified assertion and build upon that. In our culture, not only are women portrayed as hysterical harpies, they have also been portrayed as passive objects of desire, with no will or thoughts on their own, usually just as love interests. The camera lenses are always male, and they always find ways to objectify a woman, especially if it's for a sadistic pleasure of the audience. Men want women to be passive. An active woman is an anomaly that they feel uncomfortable with. A woman that is not reduced to that is a threat. This is why men vehemently despise Daenerys. Not only does she wield power, she actively fights for it, taking the role they believe is reserved for men. That causes them to feel emasculated, especially if they themselves for some reason feel powerless. This is also why they cling to characters like Stannis. They see themselves in him since they might share his specific experiences, like emasculation, hardships, not being taken seriously, etc. This is also why they desperately and obsessively want Daenerys to fail. Everything Daenerys does and says is proof of her upcoming downfall, wherein she will go crazy from having too much power and will be butchered like a dog with rabies. That's once again proving that women must remain passive objects of desire or be punished with violence, if they dare to try and hold power. Curiously, they also want this to happen to Cersei. And while in her case it will likely happen, it's very telling that they want the only queen regents holding power in their own right to have the exact same arcs and the exact same conclusions to these arcs. Cersei, killed by her intimate partner to save the world from her tyranny. Dany, also killed by her intimate partner to save the world from her tyranny. It's a pattern, an uncompelling one at that, because what is compelling about two characters having the same exact endings, especially if they are women? Note that I say men here, but this thinking also often comes from women who have internalized those ideas, and they often repeat it word for word. Patriarchy spares no one. The showrunners were not free of this either. In the show, Daenerys gets butchered by her intimate lover, but Sansa gets to rule the North. Both of these women got power, but in very different ways. Dany got her power herself and was punished for it, while Sansa asked a man, her brother, to be the queen and was rewarded for it. Therefore, Sansa isn't as threatening, though of course she is to some, because she is a woman wielding power. Also, notice how differently they talk about their journeys. Dany says that she got what she has because she believed in herself in spite of everything that happened to her, while Sansa essentially thanks her abusers for making her a stronger person, thus affirming that she needed to be abused for the pervasive pleasure of the audience in order to gain power. Sansa thus is the only worthy woman to get power because she is passive. both in the books and in the show. She does not hold any power, she does not learn how to rule, she is mostly tossed around, and that's why she, as a woman, might be worthy of power, and only after that power is granted to her by her brother, and only after she is grateful for being abused. Daenerys, however, deals with governance, commands armies, and inevitably makes mistakes, because this is how ruling is. And here lies proof that she is unfit to rule, here lies proof that this foreshadows her madness and future tyranny, and she will die inevitably 100%, either outright put down to save the world from her tyranny and madness, or the more favorable version, she just dies in a beautiful self-sacrifice, and is immediately forgotten by everyone, and of course the throne goes to some other fave of theirs, her dragons go to someone else, her armies go to someone else, etc. The other day I was browsing Reddit because I have masochistic tendencies, and on the subreddit for asoiaf someone wrote a post essentially calling out the people there for being so unoriginal when it comes to thinking of ways Dany's story might end, that it is so widely accepted that she will be butchered like a pig. Predictably, the comments were full of assertion that there is no way to make other predictions because there is no way her story could end in other way. She has to die, either butchered by her boyfriend or sacrificing herself so that a man can be a hero. They are so sure of it because they don't know anything else. Note how they are so sure of it even though Dany dying or Dany burning King's Landing has never been explicitly confirmed by George R.R. Martin. The three things George said 100% will happen is Bran becoming king, Stannis burning Shireen, and the origin of Hodor. Guess what they are the most in denial about? The show featuring this plotline is proof that it will happen in the books to them, even though famously the books and the show will have different endings and D&D likely ignored the broad strokes George gave them, but somehow the show featuring other plotlines like Jon being exiled, Stannis burning Shireen, Braemyn not becoming canon are not an indication of anything. It's just Dany's ending that just has to be the same. Whenever someone just whispers about how maybe they don't think it's the only possible ending for Dany, they get silenced. The male gaze also cannot accept that Dany may be Azor Ahai, even though she is by far the most likely candidate. She fits neatly into every element of the prophecy, and is the only one to actually wake the dragons out of stone. But still, people insist that the prophecy of Azor Ahai includes a man killing a woman, so of course the leading theory is that it is Jon Snow who is Azor Ahai, and he will forge Lightbringer by killing Daenerys, who will agree to this as punishment for her burning King's Landing. That is very unlikely to happen in the first place. Some people do realize this and claim that Azor Ahai is secretly evil. Azor Ahai is of course only evil if we talk about Dany. In the case of everyone else, he is the hero he is originally presented as. By far the finest fallacy to come out of this is people getting mad that how can we see a guy who killed his wife as a hero, but then they turn around and talk about how Jon killing Daenerys in order to be a hero is great. And now we see even more that this obsession is indeed psychosexual. Everything eventually comes back to Daenerys being mad and evil, everything is twisted for that specific purpose, to such extent that it becomes ridiculous once you look at it from the outsider perspective. That obsession comes from a psychoanalytic fear of emasculation, the borderline sexual pleasure of seeing a woman be punished for straying from her preconceived role, centuries of cultural notions of pathologizing women's emotions and women's power. Every major theory surrounding Daenerys has the same exact conclusion. Madness, madness, mad queen, dark Dany, madness, evil, villain, madness, mad queen. For example, there is a popular theory about how Dany's childhood home was not in Braavos because there was a lemon tree outside of her window and there are no trees in Braavos. The house could actually be in Dorne or in Tyrosh or anywhere else, and the reasons for Dany misremembering that could only be one. Dany is indeed the daughter of Rhaella and Aerys, she is the clothed dragon while Yangreif is a real Targaryen, which of course will turn her mad. Even though in this version of events she does not have Mad King's genes to kickstart her madness, while Yangreif does. Again, rational men and hysterical women. Dany being Azor Ahai? Well, Azor Ahai is actually evil, and by the way, George R.R. Martin said that prophecy bad. The reasons for the obsession with Dany turning mad are therefore twofold. First, the cultural notions. Secondly, the feelings of emasculation that are present when men are faced with a woman who has a traditionally masculine role that they think is reserved for them. This is why this obsession is psychosexual. Someone on the same subreddit mentioned that it would be sort of weird to have a sex slave gain power, use that power to end slavery, but then have this culminate in her being insane because of that genes, and use said anti-slavery campaign as a justification. That person asked what would be the message of such a story structure. That women should accept their subjugation and never rise above it to make the world a better place? Guess what were the responses? George R. R. Martin isn't doing PSAs. Except yes, he does. George R. R. Martin, even though he is a lukewarm liberal, is vehemently anti-slavery. My own heroes are the dreamers, those men and women who tried to make the world a better place than when they found it, whether in small ways or great ones. Some succeeded, some failed, most had mixed results. But it is the effort that's heroic, as I see it. Win or lose, I admire those who fight the good fight. Martin also wrote Fever Dream, which features this line. You know, I never held much for slavery, even if I never done much against it neither. I would have, but those damned abolitionists were such Bible thumpers. Only I've been thinking, and it seems to me maybe they were right after all. You can't just go using another kind of people, like they wasn't people at all. Know what I mean? Got to end sooner or later. Maybe if it ends peaceful, but it's got to be end even if it has to be with fire and blood, you see? Maybe that's what them abolitionists been saying all along. You try to be reasonable, that's only right, but if it don't work, you got to be ready. Some things is just wrong. They got to be ended. But seriously, there is no way to make Dany's storyline end with her going mad without it having reactionary implications, because there is no way to remove her alleged madness from the context of her ending slavery. In various media, we often see this happen anyway. A villain will talk about ending oppression, but then randomly kills a bunch of babies so that the audience can no longer sympathize with them. Or, in the quest for ending oppression, they become crazy authoritarian tyrants, and the brave heroes put them down in order to preserve the good, sacred status quo. It certainly happened in the show version of events, where after spending seasons ending slavery, Dany suddenly snapped and killed thousands of people for absolutely no reason, and the Dudebro self-insert Tyrion talked about how this was all because she killed slavers, going as far as to reference a famous First They Came poem. Because you're a Nazi if you end slavery, right? Who cares that the actual Nazis kidnapped millions of people to perform slave labor for them, and their goal was to exterminate Eastern European populations or enslave them, right? The show made Dany more ruthless, and stripped her of a lot of her compassion, humanity, and empathy, making her seem far more violent than her book counterpart. The show introduced the whole Messiah is a master element of the equation. The show added her executing a random freedman for no reason, and had her burn two slave masters for no reason, even though Dany's book art is so complicated and difficult precisely because she refuses to use dragons to solve her problems. The show even introduced a storyline of Hizdar's father being anti-slavery but being killed by her anyway, even though no such storyline in the book exists, and even though Hizdar's dad still profited off of slavery. This leads people to claim that maybe some slavers are innocent, maybe slavery isn't wrong, that maybe you can own human beings as property if you treat them well. This has added to a general perception that Dany is a ruthless totalitarian who murders anyone who stands in her way. Mind you, showrunners D&D wanted to do a show where the Confederacy won. People who cry about the ending of Game of Thrones being bad make predictions that would make the ending of A Song of Ice and Fire equally uncompelling, especially because they don't shy away from using Dany's crusade of ending slavery as foreshadowing for her future madness. According to them, Dany witnessing 163 children being crucified and retaliating against the slave masters in the same way is foreshadowing of her murdering thousands of innocent people in King's Landing. According to them, Dany killing Krasen's monarch Los, who perpetuated a vicious cycle of violence and abuse, including castration, dehumanization, and murder, is foreshadowing of her murdering thousands of innocent people in King's Landing. According to them, using the life of a woman in a magical ritual, a woman who killed her child and rendered her infertile because of some prophecy is foreshadowing of her madness. According to them, Dany is dissociating when her sexually, mentally, and physically abusive older brother is killed, a brother that sold her and 5 minutes ago threatened to kill her unborn child, is foreshadowing of her madness. They go as far as to judge Dany based on their own predictions. Dany is already too far gone because she will 100% do this and that, even though, like I said, most of these theories are founded on nothing but wish fulfillment and are a perfect example of circular reasoning. What is compelling about a sex slave turned queen regent who ends slavery turning into a mad bitch that has to be put down? There exists a milder version of this theory according to which Dany's destruction of the city may be an accident, since she might start a chain reaction with wildfire that her father hid beneath King's Landing, and she goes to redeem herself in the north, conveniently dying in the process, and her dragons, her armies, her throne going to someone they perceive as more deserving, but the root of this is much more the same. They want Dany dead because she dared to not lie down and let herself be beaten, raped, abused, and exploited, because she dared to try and make the world a better place. Funnily enough, this theory was originally a bit different. At some point, there appeared a theory that Dany will burn the Water Gardens, a retreat for children in Dorne, to show that she truly chose fire and blood, but guess what? George R.R. Martin himself shot down this theory and seemed baffled at anyone even raising it. Afterwards, the one about King's Landing appeared and it gained even more traction when the show seemingly confirmed it. This theory is so pervasive that I, someone who's been a rabid Daenerys fan and defender since I was 16, believed that Dany will accidentally nuke King's Landing and die to redeem herself, but then something clicked in my head and I realized that I was swayed by the majority, and the majority is not always right. Why would Daenerys burn King's Landing and be a mad queen just like her father, when we have a character who is obsessed with wildfire like Aerys and is compared to him on several occasions? Why would Daenerys burn King's Landing if it is Jon Connington who has Bells-related trauma and regrets not burning down a city when he had a chance? When will Dany even have time to burn King's Landing when she has so much shit in Westeros she has to deal with? Notice how what Dany does is hardly unique in the world of Ice and Fire. All main characters do heinous, morally questionable things, but it is Dany and Dany alone who is assumed to go mad on that basis, even though all the questionable things she does are in the service of a noble cause, whereas other characters usually do these things for power. For example, nobody says that Jon executing Janos Slynt for refusing to follow an order is foreshadowing of his madness, even though he does this as a display of power, not because of a noble cause. Jon also has the genes of the Mad King and all the previous Mad Targaryens, but that is conveniently never used against him. That is because this circular reasoning is only applied to Dany. All other characters are allowed to do what Dany does, but only Dany is scrutinized. The scene of Jon executing Janos and Dany executing the Tarlys is very similar, except Jon does not offer mercy to Janos while Daenerys first offers to surrender with no repercussions, then offers them to join the Night's Watch, and only after they refuse, she kills them. Jon's scene is framed as badass, but Dany's as uneasy, with Tyrion shooting where it looks, even though his own father would probably take them all as prisoners of war or kill them, never offering them peaceful surrender. Similarly, Stannis Baratheon executes people by burning them alive. In his case, that is not used as proof of his madness, and even more, excuses are made as to why it had to happen, and Stannis was completely justified in it. He burned 5 people in total, while Dany only burned 2, but it is Dany who is considered a crazy pyromaniac, even though Dany had far more reasons to do what she did. First person's life was needed to wake the dragons out of stone. Second one was a literal slaver who profited off of mutilating children. Stannis burned the following people. Alester Florent, who tried to make peace with the Lannisters. His burning is also in part to make the winds more favorable when Stannis and his forces go to aid the Night's Watch. Imagine if Dany executed anyone on that basis. In Castle Black, Stannis burns Rattleshirt, posing as Main's rider. Officially for desertion, but actually in order to trick everyone present. Imagine if Dany executed anyone to pull out a little trick. Finally, Stannis burns 3 of his soldiers who are so hungry that they resort to cannibalism. Imagine if Dany did that. She would be scrutinized to hell and back for not providing enough food for her people. In the case of Stannis, that is of course harsh justice. Not to mention that Stannis has committed the worst possible taboo in the world of Ice and Fire, kinslaying. He killed his brother. Somehow though, he won't be punished, even though no man is as accursed as a kinslayer. Is he supposed to be rewarded for that? If he killed his brother, then what would stop him from becoming Agamemnon, killing his own daughter to win a war? Curiously, these burnings are often attributed to Melisandre, and often it is Melisandre or Celis who are predicted to actually be the ones to burn Shireen. Again, hysterical, irrational women against a good, rational man. Now we see that the predictions are made by people who not only use double standards, but often are blind to the realities of their favorite characters and assign the same flaws that their favorite characters have, not shying away from denying established future elements of the story and treating the unconfirmed ones as fact. Then it is not surprise that they are in such fervor to make Dany burn King's Landing, even though other characters have far more foreshadowing for this act. I suppose that when The Winds of Winter comes out and Dany isn't the one to burn King's Landing, some new theory will emerge about Dany burning something else. All the evidence of Dany turning mad is either confirmation bias or circular reasoning. People make their predictions and theories in a way that would have academics gouging their eyes out. You should read the text and from this text predict something. What these people do instead is create a theory and skim the text to find any justification, ignoring anything that might contradict it. If you want Dany to turn mad, then everything she does will be proof for her madness. Doesn't matter if it's crucifying slavers or eating figs. This is a fallacy. One of the reasons why Dany might turn mad is the existence of young Griff. They insist that once Dany goes to Westeros and learns that there is a Targaryen monarch already on the throne, she will be angry and will want to kill him, especially because she expects to be welcomed into Westeros with open arms, and if she isn't, she will throw a temper tantrum. They ignore that Dany longs for family, grieves Aegon and Rhaenys' death, and is agonizing over the fact that she is the last Targaryen. They ignore that Griff's team is fully aware that Aegon will be considered a fake unless he has Dany by his side. They ignore that no, Dany does not expect to be universally loved, and even in a Game of Thrones, she realizes that Viserys is delusional to believe that. They hyper-focus on the clothed dragon swaying amidst a cheering crowd, so that of course means that Aegon will be universally accepted and adored, but ignore the Slayer of Lies part. And guess what? Aegon is a man, so they subconsciously assume that he will be more beloved, as opposed to the Mad Queen bitch evil hysterical tyrant, even though it is him who is described as Targaryen after all, even though he gets mad when he loses a board game, relatable but that's besides the point, and even though Tyrion himself compares him to Joffrey. Sometimes I wonder if these people even read Dany's chapters because 90% of their assertions about her character are straight up wrong. Dany is self-aware. Dany is self-critical. Dany is empathetic. Dany is loving. Dany is protective. Dany is respected and loved by her people. Dany is forgiving. Dany's problems in Slaver's Bay are because she isn't ruthless enough and isn't willing to give fire and blood to the slavers. Dany will be overjoyed to learn that she has a family left. Dany attempts to learn and respect the cultures of the cities she conquers, even if she dislikes them. Dany isn't an imperialist or colonizer. Lastly, Dany is not mad. She isn't foreshadowed to go mad, and is in fact one of the most empathetic, loving and heroic characters in the entire series. She has dragons, she has a strong claim to the throne, she is beautiful and loved romantically by many. Hence she stands in the way of the preferred endings for other characters, and most importantly for ships, and there is no force in the world stronger than hatred for a woman who stands in the way of a ship, as poor Pip Tonkin herself learned. She has resources to defeat the others, but she can't be rewarded for it, so she has to die. She has claims to the throne, but that stands in the way of Jon or Stannis or young Griff, rational men, so she has to die. She has dragons, but she's unworthy of them for all the reasons I outlined, so she has to die and someone else will get them. She defies the role assigned to her. She is a proactive woman who rules in her own right instead of remaining a passive object to gaze upon, so she has to die. This is why she is so threatening.